Our in-depth coverage continues tonight on the Killing on Canebrake murder trial. We're joined once again by legal analyst Kim Varner, Grant Varner, prominent defense attorneys here in Greenville. Gentlemen, thank you so much. As always, we heard a little bit from you earlier in the newscast. So Kim, let's begin with you. You were saying how the suspect, Zachary Hughes, continues to push that he felt like he was protecting the daughter of the victim there from the victim in this murder trial. How can the jury just act like they didn't hear any of this? Is because the judge has denied that motion, saying that evidence can't be brought in. The state continues to fight it. So as a juror, how can you just ignore none of this has happened?
Well, we've made reference to you cannot unring a bell or you can't unchop a tree. It's there. Do not think for a moment that the jurors are not going to consider it. But the judge is going to strictly admonish them as to what they are allowed to discuss and consider, and they have to follow the law. I don't know if anybody will say it out loud in the jury room because there's 12 people. They're checking one another and have opposing opinions possibly on certain issues. But if someone brought that up, that is actually juror misconduct. And they can be held in contempt of court by the judge. But that doesn't mean they're not thinking it in what they say. I think it will have an impact on their thought process, but whether it will ultimately affect the verdict, I don't really believe so, but you don't know till the verdict comes back.
Grant, a lot happened today. Let's go ahead and start now with the suspect. He is now being held in contempt of court. Now, what does that do to the trial that's now at play now that he is being held in contempt of court?
Realistically, no impact.
Okay.
The jury likely does not know that he's been held in contempt of court. And realistically, if you're already in jail, 6 more months of staying exactly where you are is honestly not a real threat to Mr. Hughes at this point.
Okay, something else about his testimony today. John Melo, now the father of that little girl he said that he was protecting, he has now been arrested, charged with accessory before the fact because of his testimony today. Have you seen anything like this where someone is on the stand and just moments later, or even while he's still on the stand, an individual is arrested by deputies?
So it's rare. I don't know that anybody in the viewing audience or any of us in this room tonight will ever see this again in our lifetimes. It's incredibly rare, but I think Greenville County law enforcement was waiting for this moment. They articulated a lot of suspicion about John Melo at the very beginning of the investigation. They have stayed adamant that he had involvement, but they couldn't quite get enough to get a warrant against him. And so no sooner did those words leave Zachary Hughes' lips than a warrant was being signed somewhere. Obviously, if they had a warrant team ready to go, they were waiting for this moment. I think they were all on standby for him to testify today, and they wasted no time to go ahead and execute those warrants and place him in custody. Where it goes from here, anybody's guess. We may be covering the trial of John Melo at some point in time. I do not think anybody involved in this case is going to get any type of real plea negotiation going forward. The solicitor's office has taken this very seriously. As Kim mentioned, there is a child involved in this whose life has been completely turned upside down, and law enforcement and the solicitor's office take that very seriously. They're going to seek some type of justice for whoever they can at this point.
Kim, what does this arrest of John Melo now do to the strategy for the state or the defense? Because he was not in custody when this trial began. Now he is for accessory before the fact to this murder that is now on trial.
First, I don't really think it's going to impact the prosecution's case that much. Now, they can say in their closing argument that you can't comment on stuff that's not in evidence before the jury. But they can hint at the fact Mr. Melo has now been arrested. They can't say those exact words. I think it answers a question that the jury probably has. But more importantly, it takes away from the defense's closing of, you got somebody here who was already been charged with a crime with her, of harassing her, who was in a custody battle with her. You've heard from the guardian. You heard the kind of things that he had. He was a contentious person. He had a bad relationship with the guardian. And why wasn't he arrested? Because he's a suspect. Well, they took that away from them immediately. So I think it hurt the defense even more. And like Grant said, I have never seen this before. I think the warrant was already ready to go. They were just waiting on the words to come out and the judge to sign it. What surprises me is this. The defendant had the opportunity to use testimony against Mr. Melo as a bargaining tool to possibly get a better deal. But I think Grant and I both believe he firmly believed and still believes he'll be found not guilty. So he didn't exercise that, or he wasn't offered a deal for that. But kind of odd, it just came out and the defendant got nothing for it.
Grant, do you agree?
Absolutely. And this is something we've discussed. Why didn't he at some point in time sit down and say, I tell you what, let's negotiate. I have information. And he didn't. He didn't. It did absolutely nothing to benefit Zachary Hughes.
Do you think that's because what he's been saying on the stand, that he feels this a just cause? He truly believes that?
I think he firmly believes this was justifiable homicide, and I think he believes somewhere in his mind that the jury will find him not guilty. And honestly, we don't know what the jury is going to come back with her verdict. They may find him not guilty.
All right. Kim, one of those things now, what do you expect for tomorrow in court? With a lot today, there were a lot of timeouts, a lot of private meetings without the jury present. What should we anticipate tomorrow?
As I understand it, and I may have this wrong, but he's still subject to cross-examination tomorrow. I don't think that's going to be extensive. Some people are speculating Walt won't ask him anything, the prosecutor. I think he will. He'll hammer home to the jury, you killed her. You didn't just kill her. You didn't stab her once. You didn't stab her twice, and so on. You stabbed her up to 36 times. That was a brutal, brutal murder. And you never said anything. If you thought this was justified, why didn't you just stay there and tell the police why you did it? Instead, you hid from all this. You did research to find out where there were no cameras to get to the house. Clearly premeditated murder. And I think he'll hammer in those points, but I think it'll be short, sweet, and to the point.
All right. Gentlemen, we'll have much more coming up from you on the 10 o'clock news tonight. Thank you as always, Kim Varner, Grant Varner. Appreciate your insight.